Hello students. Today we are going to understand the following concepts of module 1. First is file system, then characteristics of database approach, and third is file system versus database system. To understand all these topics, we have used following textbooks. First is database system concepts, second is fundamentals of database system, and third is database management system. So these are the important textbooks that we are going to use. So previous to database management system, people create their own file and in that they stores the name of the students, their address, phone number, etc. So they create their different files. For example, uh, suppose exam cell wants to create their own file or exam cell wants to create their own application program. So when they write the application program, they require the data of the students or they may require the result various examination data, exam data. So exam cell creates their own files for their applications. Similarly, if the computer engineering department required to create an application to assess the student details and their students information, they create the student table in which they store the students data about their what is their phone number, their address, their personal details, and so on. Similarly, if the library or the accounts department wants to create their application, for this application, they used to create the different files. So file is related with the students and their payment of the fees. So in the file system, what we were going to use, we were use for create the for new applications, we create the new files and store the related data. The system stores permanent record in various files and it need different application program to extract the records. Here I have written that, for example, files created by the exam cell is different than the files created by the accounts department or the exam cell or the computer department, where the applications were created by the different departments like student registration करना है, examination or results declare करना है या payment of the fees करना है. For that, they used to create the different files. But in this, what was the problem? The problem was when the exam cell wants to store the students' details. Similarly, accounts department or computer department also want to store the student details. So when the same data was going to store by in the files by different department, the data was duplicate. So here we can say that as some common data was required for different application, duplicate data saved in the different files. So what was the problems with the file system? So drawbacks of file system. The first drawback was data redundancy. As we have studied in the previous slide, that the data was duplicate because different department create their files, but they were thinking that the file is required for their application. But the file consists of the students' information was duplicate in the different department. So multiple file format was there, duplication of the information in different files. So because of that, data redundancy was the problem. And because of the data redundancy, we can say that there is a data inconsistency. Data inconsistency means if the students' data was there in the exam cell and also in the computer department and also in the account cell, if the student address is now changed, we need to change in all the files. If the student address is we are changing in the exam cell, but we are not changing in any other files, then there was a problem of the data consistency. So if the data is redundant, then there is a chances of data inconsistency. Means inconsistency means incorrect. Now next is difficulty in assessing the data. Difficulty to write a new program to carry out each new task. So if the new requirement comes, there was a problem for or difficulty to creation of the new application and then creation of the new file where the data is stored. So need to write a new program if the new requirement to carry out the new task. Next is data isolation. It means that multiple files were there and multiple file format. Someone was maybe using the any notepad, someone was maybe using the any txt file, any Excel file or any other file format to store the data. Now, integrity problem was there because as the file we create to store the information, where we are not going to give any constraint or the conditions about the data, how the data is going to store. Whether, for example, here it is saying that account balance should be greater than 0. So that condition, such a type of condition was difficult to give into the file system because there was only creation of the file and storing without any condition. Second was the problem that hard to add a new constraint or change the existing one. So it's not so easy to give any condition to the while storing the data or the new data has to be added into the file. Now next drawback about the file system is atomicity of the update. Atomicity means failure may leave database in an inconsistent state with partial updates carried out. For example, transfer of fund from one account to another should either complete or not happen at all. So when we perform any of the transaction on any of the database, maybe this is the account database or the bank database where we transfer the amount from fund from one account to another. So while doing this transaction or performing this operation, if there is a failure in between and leave the database in an inconsistent state, means transfer of amount is happened but depositing into the another account is not happened. If the and during the transferring the amount, it it fails, then the database may leads to the inconsistent state. So that is called as the atomicity. So that atomicity problem was there in the file system. Next problem was concurrent access. So when we say that multiple user can access the same application simultaneously, they are able to access the same data which we are going to store, that is students data or instructor data, or we can say that the instructor data from instructor file. So when the number of through application program, when we access the data and we do the like the transactions, then that data concurrent access by multiple users was difficult, because if we give the this facility of concurrency, it may lead to the inconsistency, data into the inconsistent state. So two people reading a balance and updating it at the same time is difficult in file system. Next, security problem. Security problem is when we give access to the user to read or write into this data in the student file, there is a no security we can provide to the data to the file, because hard to provide user access to some but not all data. So that is difficult to provide the security to the file, because we can give the access to the some file, then it is the users will get all the details from the file. Next is characteristics of the database approach. So what are the characteristics? What was because of these drawbacks of file system, we nowadays using the database management system. So database management system software gives us various facilities, or we can say that these are the characteristics of database management system or database approach, which through which we get the we can say that it will overcome all the problems which were occurred because of the file system. Now, what are the characteristics? Those characteristics, the first characteristic is nothing but a self-describing nature of the database system. So database system not only stores the data, but it also stores the information about that data. So that data or information about the data, description about the data is called as the metadata. The DBMS catalog stores the description of a particular database. It stores that what kind of data we are going to store, what is their data structure, and what are the different constraints. So this allows the DBMS software to work with different database applications. So different database applications we can use for the same database. Now, insulation between the programs and the data. As we can say that data is stored somewhere and the application programs accessing is at the front end or at the client side. So there is an insulation between the programs and the data. The structure of the data file is stored in the DBMS catalog separately from the access program. So program data independence is there. Next is data abstraction. The data model is used to hide the storage details, where the data is stored. So when we do the reservation through RCTC, we are unaware about where the data is stored and on which server, whether the server is in Chennai or whether the server is in Delhi. So the data model is used to hide the storage details and present the users with a conceptual view of the database. As per the requirement, the data accessing of the data from the database is different for different users. The program refers to the data model constructs rather than data storage details. Next is about the support of multiple views of the data. So each user may see a different view of the database, which describe only the data of interest to that user. So if the bank manager is there, then bank manager is getting a different view of the data. And whereas the person who does the transaction, the person gets the different user interface. Or we can say that the front end where the person can access through his login. So when the manager do the login, the person after the login and password, the manager may get the different access of the data. So manager can read, update, delete any kind of data from the database. But the person who access the data only uh, for his login, the person can see the user interface where he can only perform the operation of the transactions. Is not able to see the details about the customer and their other bank details. So each user may see the different view of the database. Next is characteristics of databases, sharing of data and multi-user transaction processing. So this allows the set of concurrent users to retrieve from and to update the database. So concurrency control in the database management system gives us the guarantee that each transaction is correctly executed or aborted. Abort means when there is a failure in between. So when the transaction is execution is there, T1 is the transaction executed, and if at the 99th location instruction, if the transaction fails, then the transaction will be aborted. But if the execution of the transaction is completed successfully 100%, then we can say that the data is permanently saved in the database, updated data. Recovery is required when there is a failure during any of the transaction execution. What is my online transaction processing OLTP? Because the database is assessing through various transactions in the real-time environment. So updation of the database is a continuous process. So we are saying that OLTP is a major part of the database application. Here we require the real-time updation of the database. For example, if I have a 100 products and if 90 products are sold today, it should be updated. So through particular transaction, if 90 products are purchased by a particular customer, then how many? Only 10 products are left. So in this way, we can say that it is an online transaction processing. Now, so what is the difference between the file system and the database management system? File system is a software that store data in a various files of OS as per the requirement of the application, whereas DBMS is a software for managing the database. Here we know that because of the different kind of files we create for different applications, redundant data can be present in the file system. But in DBMS, we have only one copy of the each data, so there is no redundancy. Here, less data consistency in the file system as the redundancy is there. The consistency of the data may be there or may not be there because redundancy of the data. But in DBMS, database management system, there is no data redundancy, so data consistency is always be there. Next is, it doesn't provide backup and recovery of the data if it is lost. If the file is deleted, if we delete the file, recovery of the file from the data is difficult. Whereas there is a provision of a backup and recovery in the database management system. There is no efficient query processing in the file system. We cannot perform any query on the file system, but we can easily write the query by using the database management system. Storing and retrieving of the data cannot be done efficiently. It's difficult through application program, but when we write the query, it's easy to store and retrieve the data from the database by using the SQL commands, structured query language command. Concurrent and access of the data in the file system is difficult, but it is easy because concurrency control module in the database management system provide you the facility to access the data simultaneously by different users. Next is file system ka difference and database management system ka difference continued. So in this, file system provide less security in the comparison to the DBMS, but security mechanism is already inbuilt in the database management system. Recovery management is difficult if the system crashes. Here in the database management system, crash recovery mechanism is inbuilt. File system gives the details of the data representation and storage of the data. DBMS provide an abstract view. Here, it is not providing the complete data and the whole data will be available. Here, the hiding of the data is required for database management system, different users. So abstract view we can create and provide. Data independence is not possible in the file system, where as file structure and application programs are tightly coupled together, but here data independence is possible. So if we change the physical layer, then if some changes are there in the physical layer, then there is no difference between the in the logical layer or the upper layer. Similarly, for logical data independence, if we do the changes in the logical schema, then application programs will not be affected. So this is, there is a data independence is available in the DBMS, which is not possible in the file system. So in this video, we have studied file system, characteristics of database approach, and file system versus database system in detail. Thank you, students. Thanks for watching this video. Please like, share, and subscribe the channel. Thanks a lot.